Hello. Hello, sir. Hello. Am I audible, sir? Hello. 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 Am I audible, sir? Hello. Am I audible? Hello. Okay, sir. Yes, I am audible. That's okay. Okay, sir. I'll begin. But I'm not getting either I'm audible or not. So it's okay. I hope I'm audible. I'm Dr. Vilas Buwa, Head and Assistant Professor in the Department of English, Vishwakarma Singh College, Kolam Walchan Nagar, Taluka Indapur, District Pune. So, dear friends, since BARTI has taken initiative and invited me to be the part of this net state coaching class. So, dear friends, net and set, it requires a focus study. It is, of course, you have done your PG or MA in English, and you might have already tried or attempted net or state exam. I have also done my net and set. I did my MA from HPT College Nashik, which comes in the jurisdiction of Savitribai Phule Pune University, Pune. I did my postgraduate certificate in teaching English at CIEFL, and also I have completed successfully postgraduate diploma in teaching English from Central Institute of English and Foreign Languages, Hyderabad. I have also completed MPhil from EFLU, that is English and Foreign Languages, Hyderabad, which was earlier known as CIEFL. I did my NET and SET, and as well I did PhD in semiotics from the Department of English, Savitribai Phule Pune University, Pune. I have also done MSCIT, and apart from this, I am teaching for UG since 1995, and also the guest faculty for PG. I am a PhD research guide at the Department of English, Savitribai Phule Pune University. Some of the students have already pursued their PhD from the department under my guidance. So this is enough introduction, I think, and also I have conducted some NET and SET workshops, and we carry the legacy of the great professor, late Dr. K.S. Iyer. So we are students of K.S. Iyer. So come back to the point, and Jai Hind once again to all you. So I'll try to share my screen and so that we can discuss. Okay. Yes, I'll share the screen so that you can yes, I'm trying for that. I'll share the screen. Yes. Yes, sir. Is it so now? Do you see the screen? I'm not getting your response, but still I continue. I hope you are listening to me. So studying literature for NET and SET examinations. and the topic is poetry. But before that, while we begin, I know that some of the students might have already appeared for this exam. Some of have you the experience, and some of you may be the new one to join such a class. So see, for the I'm just restricted to uh, paper second and not dealing with paper one anymore. So from various topics for paper second. First of all, we have the overlook at the topic: drama, poetry, fiction and short stories, non-fictional prose, language, basic concepts, theories and pedagogy, theories and pedagogy. Uh, then English in India, history, evolution in future, literary theory, cultural theory, literary criticism, literary theory, post-World War II, and research methods and materials in English. So there is a spelling mistake of English, the language it seems. Yeah. So these are some of the topics. See, while we study uh, for net set, we must be focused. Our perspective must be focused. Wherever I keep reservations everywhere while I discuss, because if I have to say something much more than it is being discussed. And at the same time, while we discuss, just some tips for you people. First of all, concentrate on syllabus. Concentrate on these topics: drama, poetry, fiction and short stories, non-fictional prose. So I'll go to the next one as your here. Now for studying, how to study it is a question. I have much experience why the students from rural areas or having the Marathi language background. So there is a kind of confidence we need. So here, how to study literature, how to study language, that must be very much important, I feel. See, there is a book by Mario Clarer, and as Mario Clarer discusses the model. So how to study literature, as there are the various forms we see: drama, poetry, fiction, short stories, and there are minor forms as well, like one-act plays, essay, and so on. So literature is at the center, and it is to be studied from various perspectives. The number one, that is text. Number two, author. Number three, the reader. Number four, content. So the model I try to let you know, and which is taken from Mario Cler's book, I have already mentioned in the references, which we should use. So what is a text and textual approach? So this is a broad division, and here you will find forms of literature as I have discussed. So approaches to literature, one of this is consider textual approaches. And what mean by text? See, a text means anything that makes meaning to you. See, these are some of the modern concepts. So we say that is there a textbook in the classroom? What Stanley Fish says, or textbook which is prescribed to study for we people. So what is the textual uh, approach? So it studies language, linguistics. A text is a combination of science. Language is a science system. It is a means of communication through which we express our feelings, emotions, ideas, concepts, and so on. It is a medium of communication. And the model of communication, basically, in communication, there is an addresser who addresses or who speaks. We can say speaker frame as well. The message is transferred to the addressee. The message is encoded by the speaker, which is transmitted to a channel or medium, maybe written or oral or spoken, whatever you call it. And the message is decoded by the addressee or the listener. And a text. Text is a combination of signs. The signs may be linguistic, non-linguistic, maybe object, maybe any picture, any poster, anything else that makes you a meaning. So what is the textual approach? Textual approach is, we call it linguistic approach in another word. The text is formed out of language, and language is an object of linguistics. So, the development of textual approaches you can find. Philology. It was earlier, the linguistics was known as earlier. So, what is linguistics? We'll come to it. Philology, that is approaches which on editorial problems and the reconstruction of text. So editorial problems and reconstruction of the text we call philology. Rhetoric. In ancient Greece, when elocution competitions or they were used to conducted or organized, or rhetoric. In a simple manner, we can say figures of speech or rhetorical figures we say. So any poem, any text, either it may be a drama. Now see, a drama is a text for us, a poem is a text for us, fiction is a text for us, non-fiction is a text for us. Any form that makes a meaning or we extract meaning from it, that we call a text. Its length might vary, but it is modern approach. Look at it. So language is the essence of literature. Any literature is constructed in language. A fiction, the long narrative story with various aspects you can find out. Various elements are there, just as setting, plot, characters, subplots, and so on. Theme, narrative technique. So, rhetoric. Rhetoric means aspects of form like textual and narrative structure, point of view, plot, pattern and style, rhetoric figures, choice of words or diction, syntax, meter, etc. So, how in a poem or in any text, see again there is a question of the comparison of prose and poetry. Basically, sometimes these two concepts are used from binary perspective, plus minus like this. But as a text, which is formed through language, formed through the selection of words, the selection of words which are used. So figures of speech, rhetorical figures. In modern, uh, there is a stylistic, one of the branches of linguistics, you can say. So that is sometimes in literary theory or criticism, the rhetorical figures are thought which are a kind of different, that is the literary criticism or literary perspective to look at in a text. But here you will find how in literary language or the language of literature in any form, rhetorical figures are used just like simile, metaphor, imagery, symbol, and so on. There are various figures of speech we find. So in a poetry, we find a word, it has a meaning, it has a literal meaning, it has associative meaning, it has a contextual meaning, and at the same time, the word has music. The word has its own music, it has its own pattern. And see, the language of poetry is different from prose. Poetic language, we say, as I.A. Richard, he tried to differentiate between scientific language and poetic language. So that was a different debate. It was initiated in those days. So linguistic approach, even you can say, see, in the first half of the 20th century, Ferdinand de Saussure, from which generally we think that structuralism began. The basic concept he had mentioned because he was teaching in Geneva and he was teaching linguistics. After his death, his lectures were collected by his students, compiled and published a book, a course in general linguistics, and which was later on translated into English by Bad Back, yeah, Bad Baxton or some the writer. He had translated it into English, the general principles of linguistics. So it is a kind of general linguistics, and he mentioned basic. I don't want to go to in detail in linguistics. Some other lecturers or some other associate assistants, they can deal with that one. So I'm not going to. But still, my point is that first of all, concentrate on the syllabus. Think on the syllabus. Think on each topic of the syllabus. I know you are acquainted with some of the terms, but still, we find the failure because of we do not go back to the syllabus, we do not go back to the topic. We do not think on the topic from various perspectives. So this is one reason what I find of being unsuccessful in net and set. So linguistics, how language to be studied, it is the point. But before that, let me have to point out what Ferdinand de Saussure had mentioned. He asserted that language is arbitrary, means there is no any natural relationship between the object and the word. So a word is a sign for him. A sign has two components. Signifier, that is the sound image, and signified, that means the object. So when we say why a dog is called a dog, in the word dog, is there any kind of dogginess? is, do we find it is a nomenclature. There is no any natural relationship between the word, the sound image and the object. So he had pointed out that one. So the discussion of sign system and all that will go ahead. So he considers language as a sign system, and sign consists of two components that we call bipartite model, or uh, two components are there. And these two components, which are signifier and signified. Signified can go ahead and become signifier. So these are some of the terms, but still you have to understand with the example. For example, a rose, a flower. So its sound image is a rose. This is sound image, and the object is the actual flower. So the rose, which indicates or represents the object rose. But is it only that limited one? The signifier is a sound image, that is rose, as you listen it, the word, and actual rose. Now, a rose is a symbol of peace and harmony. It is symbol of love. So, rose becomes signifier, the object becomes signifier, that means the signified becomes signifier, and then there is the object, that is the symbol, which is love, peace, harmony, which stands for. My intention is that signified becomes signifier further, and meanings are getting ahead. So, what Safir has told, or he asserted, language is arbitrary. Sign has two components, signifier and signified. So the structure of language he trying to do, or he trying to mention that language has structure. So language as an object we can study, just like in laboratory we consider an object of study, and we take a certain component and we study. For example, a plant, we take a plant sapling, or and we study that one. So what do you call zoology and further? So they go to the molecules and all like this. The scientific method is applied. In the same manner, linguistics is a science that studies language. Come back to the second point, third point I mean. Sachir had made first point, language is arbitrary. Number two, language is a science system, and a science has two components, signifier and signified. Number three, he put the syntactic and paradigmatic relationship between the sentence and all this. He goes ahead and says that diachronic and synchronic linguistics. So what is diachronic and synchronic? Diachronic, that means a language of a certain period, historically we study, and synchronic, that we call ekakalik. So the synchronic and diachronic. So some of these concepts, he had also mentioned certain concepts he considered langue and parole. These are the two terms he uses. So what is langue? Langue is a system, and parole is the actual use of or actual utterance of a speaker. So linguistics we study language at different levels: phonetics, phonology, syntax, semantics, morphology, pragmatics, or some people just add to it, or sometimes reduce it. So I won't focus on linguistic analysis. My point is that when we study a poem, when we study any form of literature which is constructed in sign which constructed in language, and language is a science system. So the essence of any literary form is language. Through language, it is expressed. Maybe we can say a writer finds a particular form suitable to express his or her views. For example, poetry, emotional, some kind of personal experiences, in short, just like we see the poem that is very famous by Robert Burns, or Red Rose. So the poet finds a suitable form to express his views, his emotions, his passions, whatever it may be, we can say, through a poem. Or sometimes one can, uh, he or she wants to tell a plot to you or a story to you. So a short story or fiction maybe used. Or, I mean, it is the intention of the writer to express or to reach the reader to a particular form that should be effective. Anyway, there are several linguistic forms or what we call it related to textual approaches. Formalism, which was took place in the first half of the 20th century in Russia. Formalism, Russian formalism. These are some of the wings we can discuss later on. But the basic notion of formalism is that they are interested. They have already divided the content and form. So the content of a poem and form of the poem, these two are concentrated, but at the same time, they are more concentrated on the language. So they are not talking about language in general. They are talking about, or they have emphasized on literariness of language and how language, the literariness, which extends the meaning. So the literature, a form of literature, a poem, a reader reads and tries to extract meaning from the particular piece of work of art. So structuralism, it basically considers structures everywhere. And new criticism, again, that is the textual approach. I'm telling you about, there are several textual approaches. How literature to be studied? Literature is to be studied from various perspectives. Number one, that is textual. And from textual approaches, there are several approaches which comes under textual approaches. So, new criticism in 1930s, you know how traditional individual talent, T.S. Eliot, they say. T.S. Eliot criticizes romanticism for their expression of personality in all this. If you read T.S. Eliot's essay closely, you will find that he mentions tradition and all this, but at the same time, the role of poet like catalyst. But at the same time, impersonality theory he mentions and criticizes romantic poetry. I.A. Richards and others, they tried and mentioned that a text itself is a complete. For example, a poem, any poem, itself it is complete, organic, and able and enough to have for meaning. So the reader can understand, the reader can extract meaning from a text. So that was the basic notion, and you know how these terms which affective fallacy, irony, paradox, intentional fallacy, intention, extension, and so on, which are related to new criticism. So that is also not my part here, but it comes under textual approach. Then comes semiotics. As I have already said, semiotics is a science of signs, S-I-G-N-S. And how these signs are organized, how these signs convey meaning. For example, if you see or red light at a signal, red signal, we stop. It is a sign we have assumed, we are follow it. And this red color, which makes us stop, it is a sign. So semantics is a science of signs which analyzes critically how signs are used and how what is reflected through uh, the use of signs. Deconstruction, Derrida is very much associated with the theory of deconstruction, how a text can be restructured, not destructed. Text is restructured through analysis, and that is the theory in 1967 or 56, I think 95, 96, like that. In a University of Hopkins, he read the paper Sign Structure, uh, and he mentioned several basic things, but that is not also my part here. And then comes stylistics, of course, how the language is used, what kind of, see, here is the clash between rhetorical figures or rhetorics and stylistics. Both of them analyze how the language is used. So, what is style in what way? So, stylistics finds out various kinds of deviations we find in a poem. Deviations, I mean, a poet which deviates from the standard language. He uses various words. He violates deviations in the sense that the violation of the standard norm. The language of prose, as we use in day-to-day life, it has its own grammar. It has some kind of vocabulary and all this. But deviations are there. Various deviations at regional deviations at the dialect, deviations at dialect, then deviations at syntax, deviations at morphology, deviations at semantic level, pragmatic level, at several levels. Some kinds of parallelism is there. Sometimes coinages, new words are used, like non-formation, nonce formation. Sometimes the poet uses a word only for one. Like so all these are studied as a text, as a textual approach. So language is the essence of this textual approach. So while we study literature, it is number one, we have to look at literature from textual approach. And now, here is the basic, again, the second approach, that is author-oriented approaches. See, come back to the point again, C.S. Eliot had criticized or he had his views on personality. It is not an expression of personality, but escape from personality, what he says in the theory of impersonality, the last part of the essay, Tradition and Individual Talent, which was published in 1922. So this essay is basic one, and it is expected, the new critics and other people, formalists and all this, they are not interested in the normal one. They are interested in literalness of language. So while we study a poem, so it does not need, there we have to consider the poet's life. Of course, poet has life of his own, but when we study a poem, sometimes the reader likes the poem very much. Might be others do not like it. And there are kinds of fallacies. So intentional fallacy, that is the word which is used, the term which is used in new critical theory. Biographical approach, the personal life of a poet or a writer does not require or there is an intention, what the writer says, and we have to extract the same from the text. So it is not like that, and that's what the historical or the poet's life is kept away from the text. Text is thought to be the complete one. It has its organicness, it has its, so the students are related or the readers are expected to read any text very closely. So that is also expected from yes, dear students. Yeah, of course, you are live, but I'm not getting the response. If you just put a response that am I audible, then it will be good for me. Otherwise, it's okay. Fine. So come back to the point. So the psychological criticism and all this phenomenological. So I'm giving you the broad outline for you people how to study literature while preparing for NET and SET. While preparing for NET and SET, we must have precise and clear idea so that we can approach to literature in a systematic way. Unless and until you adopt, otherwise you will find you will browse here and there and some kind of material you will in search of. Very much material, I mean, which is available on internet, and several references are there. Several types of material is available. But anyway, that is not my point. My point is that we have to understand literature, how to look at literature. See, when we see the questions in exam, we find several things are there. Sometimes we find the patterns of questions there. We'll come to that little later on. Yes. Now the contextual third point is a text is to be studied in the context. It is obvious. Any text, now you can consider the poetry, drama, short story, non-fictional writing. Anything is a text. But generally, we feel that the text now we consider drama, poetry, short story, literary forms at this level right now for a limited consideration. So any text is to be studied into context. Context is important. In a communication, when there is a text, verbal or written, it is in a context. The context may be historical, Marxist literary theory. See, when we study literary criticism, we apply various theories. For example, Shakespeare's famous tragedy Hamlet, which was later on as the development of psychology as a field of study. When there is a development of psychology, Hamlet was analyzed from psychological perspective, and it is rejuvenated. And how Electra complex, Oedipus complex, these concepts from psychology, psychological analysis, or psychoanalysis, we can say. Freud, Jung, Adler, and others have put the theory of psychology. They have contributed to it. So my point is that Hamlet was analyzed in the context of psychological criticism. Context is important. Sometimes in day-to-day language, we find when the context is changed, meaning is changed. So the context we apply. For example, let me tell you this frankly. When we study any short story, For example, you have read Babro Bagul's story, and Abba has mentioned that story how when I hit the car, and what does he face? A wonderful kind of explanation we find. How caste discrimination is there, it is a perspective, it is a context. And we have to analyze through that context. Here are limited items you see on the screen, but you can add much more. So historical context, from history perspective, suppose a novel, how history is reflected. There are now you see there are several kinds of debates and all these. So it is a fiction. Fact plus imagination we call fiction. And in literature, imagination plays a great role. So the context is important. My point is that context is important. You can apply it from Marxist literary theory. So Karl Marx, he put several, just like base, superstructure, historical materialism, class struggle, the theory of surplus value and all this. So this sociological approach. So Marx was the center in all this. So it is also a context. Feminist literary theory, you can analyze a story or any form of text from feminist perspective. It is a context. So while we say feminist theory, we must have to use or read Vilas Buwa, then Virginia Woolf, and there is no one genuine or one feminism as such. But there are various kinds of feminism, various facts, various waves are there. Here in India, the Western feminism or racial feminism, it has a different context. Once there was an article written by Vilas Buwa on Dalit patriarchy. Read sometime if you get time. Okay. New historicism, it is the context. So any history, any book of history is to be considered as a form of literature. That is the basic notion. Roman Ingarden and other people are there. So I have initiated on the new historicism. It needs a separate lecture or to talk on new historicism, but only the basic concern is that history is narrated. Somebody narrates. It is subjective. The narration is subjective. It is narrated. A fiction is narrated. It is a story. In the same manner, new historicism considers history as a narration. And of course, it carries literary characteristics. It is a context. Cultural studies or criticism. Now see, there is a cultural studies. It's a separate point now we see. Again, we have to think on what is culture, what is cultural studies. I'll talk on it a little later on. Still I'm studying on cultural studies. So I'll tell you what cultural studies, and that is little bit, it requires some kind of study at the same time. Archetypal criticism is a context. Eco-criticism. Now see, the environmental perspective is there. How environment, ecology is seen in literature, in a poem, or in a novel, or a drama, and so on. So we call green studies for that. LGBTQIA, here only 5 points are written. From LGBTQ, lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, all these. So how they got their representation in literature. So what do they say about their feminism, their discrimination? So it is a context. You can add so many contexts from your perspective. Here are only some uh, references I have put here. Okay. So after the third approach, that is number one, textual approach. Number two, author-oriented approach. Number three, contextual approach. And number four, approaches to literature from reader-oriented approaches. Now see, in the whole business of reading and writing, unless and until there is a reader, the writer or the author never gets life. Who reads? To whom he or she reads? The author writes for whom? What he has expected. Who are the readers? So, the reader is important, not only writer or the context or text and all those. If there is no reader, there is no any progress at all. So, readers are very important. While the author or the context or the language and all these, the reader perceives a literary form. The reader tries to extract meaning from the text. So, reader is important. There is an essay by Roland Barthes, The Death of the Author. The notion is that a reader gives the life, he is the co-writer. He co-writer in the sense that he is supposed to write or indirectly helps to write the work of art or a particular piece of art. So, whatever the writer wants to say, he has already said. Now, the text or the book is the property of the reader, property of other people. So, there is no relationship between. We can't say that exactly no relationship and all this, but still, the reader gives the meaning. The reader can criticize, reader can appreciate, and the reader has its own autonomy. He reads because of reader is not innocent. Once there was a question which was asked in uh, net, I think net or said, is reader innocent? And question was put. Elaborate. Some kind of question, some kind of like this, the question was there. See, a reader comes with his uh, it's sorry, I think there is a network issue. I'll just start the other one. I'm not getting the response actually. Uh, I'll come back and sharing just a minute. There is a I'm coming back and I'll share the uh, screen at the same time. Yes. So you are free to ask questions. I know there is a interruption, but anyway, you can call me. You can have a chat box. So even next time, uh, I'll provide my email ID and will share to you whatever may be the question. Please ask the question and you have the perspective for the next step. That is to be focused and not to read anything. Just concentrate on the authentic material, authentic sources. It's okay. Thank you. Thank you very much. You can take my email ID as well, vilas.buwa@gmail.com. Okay, you can contact me. So this is right now. I'll share you another Gmail. Okay. So share your contacts, your queries. Share your questions on this mail. So that next time I'll answer to you. Okay? Thanks. Thank you very much. So see you. Okay, bye. If you have any queries, please raise your hand. I don't know how many people have joined it or not. I'm not getting much idea. Anyway, thank you. Thank you very much.